How does a young nurse vanish on her way to work? And why did it take 25 years just to find her bicycle? Her name was Anna Miller, 24 years old, a nurse in Wichita, Kansas. It was September 1998. She left home around 10:30 p.m. riding her bike to the county hospital. Just 4 miles, a route she had taken dozens of times before. She never made it. Anna disappeared somewhere between her front porch and the hospital parking lot. Police searched the roads. Neighbors joined the hunt. Flyers went up. Her family waited by the phone every night. But days turned into weeks, then months, then years. No bike, no body, no trail. And then, 25 years later, a hunter discovered a rusted bicycle in a ravine. It was Anna's. That single find reopened one of Kansas's darkest unsolved mysteries. This is the story of Anna Miller's disappearance. A night shift that never began. A search that lasted decades. And the shocking truth that finally surfaced. Before we dive in, let me know in the comments where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe. Your support helps keep these cases alive. Anna was born in 1974 in Wichita. She was the eldest child in a working-class family. Her father, Robert Miller, was a mechanic who fixed farm equipment and old trucks. Her mother, Linda, worked part-time at a local church, organizing events and volunteering with youth groups. The Millers were not wealthy, but they were steady. Neighbors described them as a family that kept to themselves, worked hard, and showed up on time. Anna grew up in a modest, 2-bedroom house on the east side of town. Friends from elementary school still remember her routines. She was the girl who always had her homework finished, who returned library books on time, and who never missed a school bus. Her former classmate, Karen Johnson, told reporters by 1996, Anna had completed her nursing degree and started work at Wichita County Hospital. She joined the staff at a time when the hospital was struggling with high turnover. Nurses came and went. But Anna stood out. She was young, energetic, and willing to take shifts others avoided. Her supervisor, Mary Collins, later testified in interviews. Anna was the kind of nurse every hospital wants. She volunteered for nights. She didn't complain. She was always early, always prepared. Hospital records confirm that between 1996 and 1998, Anna worked over 120 night shifts. That's an extraordinary number for a nurse in her first 2 years. She earned the trust of senior doctors and became a favorite among patients. One colleague said, "You never had to wonder if Anna would show up. She was already there when you walked in." Her reputation went beyond the hospital. Parents whose children were treated remembered her kindness. Elderly patients recalled her calm voice. For Wichita County Hospital, Anna represented stability. Losing her, suddenly and without reason, was a blow not only to her family, but to the entire medical community. Routine is the key word when describing Anna's life. She did not own a car. Wichita was spread out, but Anna preferred her bicycle. It wasn't unusual in the 1990s for people to bike to work, especially short distances. Anna's commute was about 4 miles. She took the same route every time, leaving her small apartment on Maple Street, cutting across 2 neighborhood roads, then following the main stretch that led to the hospital. Neighbors saw her nearly every evening. A retired postal worker, Frank Dawson, later told police, "If you sat on your porch at 10:30, you'd see Anna go by. Always the same time. Head down, focused on the road. Never late." Her routine made her disappearance even more alarming. This wasn't a long, dangerous journey. It was a short, familiar ride she had done dozens of times. Anna's habits reinforced the picture of predictability. She woke early, even on days off. She went to the grocery store every Wednesday. She attended church on Sundays when she wasn't on shift. She paid her rent on time, called her parents every Thursday, and kept her calendar neatly pinned to her fridge. Investigators later said this consistency is why they immediately suspected foul play. This wasn't a woman who skipped work or disappeared on a whim, one detective explained. If she didn't show up, something happened. Like many young professionals, Anna balanced work with a modest social life. She had a boyfriend named Michael Thompson, a local construction worker. They had been dating for just over a year. By most accounts, the relationship was steady but not without small conflicts. Police records show minor disputes between the two, mostly about Anna's demanding schedule. Michael wanted more time together. Anna prioritized her shifts. Friends described their arguments as normal young couple stuff. No reports of violence, no protective orders, no red flags. Still, when Anna vanished, investigators looked closely at Michael. In every disappearance, partners are questioned first. He was cooperative, providing an alibi for the night of September 14, 1998. He claimed he was home watching television after a long day at work. At the time, his story checked out. For Anna's parents, Michael was not the focus. They supported him and believed he wanted the best for their daughter. But as the case dragged on, whispers in the community raised suspicions. Was he jealous? Did an argument escalate? These questions never completely went away. Outside of her relationship, Anna kept close ties with her family. She called her parents weekly. She visited her younger brother David at college whenever she could. Her friends described her as present, always making time for birthdays and holidays. This strong network of connections is what fueled the search after she disappeared. Everyone noticed when she was gone. Everyone cared enough to act. To understand why Anna's disappearance caused such shock, we need to picture Wichita in the late 1990s. The city had about 300,000 residents. It was large enough to feel urban but small enough to maintain a sense of community. Violent crime existed, but most of it occurred in specific neighborhoods, far from Anna's quiet route to work. In 1998, Wichita was seen as safe, particularly for young professionals like Anna living in residential areas. Families left at 9 p.m. Anna finished dinner with her parents. She washed her plate, changed into her scrubs, and tied her hair back. She slipped on a light jacket. The night air was cool. She packed a small shoulder bag with her ID badge, wallet, and a flashlight she always carried for the darker stretches of road. At 9:15 p.m., neighbors saw her leave. Mr. and Mrs. Collins, who lived across the street, recalled the moment. "We saw her pedaling off like always. Nothing unusual, same bike, same pace." Anna's bike was a standard road bicycle, white frame, black seat, a small headlight fixed to the handlebars. She always rode the same route, 4 miles from her house to the hospital. It took about 15 minutes if traffic was light. She had taken it dozens of times, without incident. This was routine, predictable, safe. Until that night. At 9:40 p.m., a man named James Parker, who was driving home from his late shift, saw Anna. She was riding south along Main Street about 1 mile from the hospital. He told police later, "She was moving fast, head down like she was trying to get there on time." The bike light was on. It was definitely her. That was the last confirmed sighting of Anna Miller, alive. Just 20 minutes later, she was expected at work, but she never arrived. At 10 p.m., inside Wichita County Hospital, the shift supervisor noticed something odd. Anna's name was on the schedule, but her station was empty. Co-workers described her as punctual to the minute. If she was running even 5 minutes late, she would call. But this time, there was no call. The supervisor dialed Anna's home. Her parents answered. They said she had left at 9:15, just like always. By now, nearly an hour had passed. Concern set in quickly. By 10:30, the supervisor called again. Still no word. By 11 o'clock, the hospital reported Anna missing to the Wichita Police Department. In less than 2 hours, what began as an ordinary bike ride had turned into a potential emergency. At midnight, 2 patrol officers were dispatched to canvass the route from Anna's home to the hospital. They drove slowly, sweeping their headlights along the ditches and sidewalks. No bike, no bag, no sign of Anna. Around 12:30 a.m., canine units were deployed. The dogs searched the roadside and wooded patches. They picked up faint traces near Main Street but lost the scent quickly. By 1 a.m., helicopters equipped with searchlights scanned the fields and riverbanks. Nothing was found. The first official missing person report was filed at 1:15 a.m. For Wichita, a mid-sized city with relatively low violent crime at the time, this was not a typical Saturday night. As dawn approached on September 13th, the search intensified. Volunteers from the hospital, neighbors, and off-duty officers joined the effort. They scoured the 4-mile route. They checked culverts, drainage ditches, and abandoned lots. Posters went up almost immediately. Missing nurse, Anna Miller, 24 years old. Yet nothing turned up. Anna's bike was gone. Her bag was gone. Even the flashlight she always carried was missing. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. By the following day, theories began to circulate. Several residents reported seeing a blue pickup truck driving slowly near Main Street around the time Anna was last seen. One woman described it as older, maybe a Chevy, with rust along the side. Another said the truck seemed to be following a cyclist. This became the first major lead. Police issued a call for anyone with information about a blue truck in the area. At the same time, investigators turned their attention to Anna's boyfriend, Michael. He was 26, worked at a local hardware store, and had been dating Anna for over a year. He was questioned extensively. Police asked about arguments, tensions, or reasons Anna might have disappeared voluntarily. Michael admitted they had argued days before about his long work hours, but insisted it was nothing serious. Detectives reviewed his alibi. Security footage from the store where he worked showed him clocking out at 10:05 p.m., too late to have been near Anna when she vanished. Phone records also confirmed calls made from the store landline around 9:45 p.m. Michael was cleared as a suspect. That left the truck. By the end of the first 48 hours, the Wichita Police Department faced a grim reality. No bike, no bag, no witness who could say exactly what happened in those last minutes. The only tangible clue was the blue truck, and even that was vague. The community was shaken. Wichita, in the late 1990s, was not known for violent abductions on residential roads. This was the kind of crime people associated with big cities, not a quiet Kansas town. But now, the question everyone was asking became unavoidable. How does a young nurse vanish on a 4-mile bike ride in full view of her own community? The first hours of a missing person case are critical. In Anna Miller's case, those hours began the moment she failed to appear at her shift at Wichita County Hospital on the night of September 12, 1998. Anna had never once been late to work. When the charge nurse called her home around 10:10 p.m. and her parents answered, saying she had left almost an hour earlier, alarm bells rang immediately. By 11 p.m., patrol units were dispatched just after 11:30 p.m. The 4-mile route from Anna's home to the hospital was mapped and divided among officers. Flashlights scanned ditches, fences, and roadside brush. At the same time, Anna's family gathered in their living room, waiting for news. Detective Laura Jensen, one of the first supervisors on scene, later recalled, "From the beginning, we treated this like something more than a walk away. The distance was short, the path was known, and the absence was unlike her." By midnight, Wichita police officially entered Anna into the NCIC, National Crime Information Center database, as a missing person. A command post was set up near the hospital parking lot. The first search ran along the direct route, Maple Avenue, then south on Main Street, ending at the hospital entrance. Officers drove slowly with spotlights scanning shoulders and alleys. They looked for a fallen bicycle, discarded belongings, or any sign of a struggle. Nothing. At 12:45 a.m., a canine unit arrived. The dog was given Anna's pillowcase from home to track her scent. The trail picked up faintly at her block, followed the road for nearly 2 miles, and then stopped cold at a busy intersection on Main Street. Handlers noted the abrupt end was unusual. The scent did not fade gradually, it simply ceased. By dawn, helicopters circled above, using searchlights to sweep the open fields beyond town. Officers canvassed convenience stores and gas stations, asking attendants if they had seen a young woman on a bicycle. Flyers were printed within 12 hours. The following morning, September 13th, more than 200 volunteers joined. They formed lines across vacant lots and creek beds. Farmers allowed access to their land. For 2 full days, the search continued. But the results were devastating. No bicycle, no purse, no flashlight, no body. One local paper summarized it in a headline: "Nurse vanishes on night ride. No trace found." The investigation relied heavily on witness accounts. Between 9:30 and 10 p.m. on the night of her disappearance, multiple people had been driving or walking near Main Street. One of the most notable witnesses was James Parker, a retired mechanic. He told police, "I saw her pedaling hard, head down, light on the front wheel still shining." That was maybe 9:40. She was moving fast, like she didn't want to be late. That sighting placed Anna less than a mile from the hospital. But Parker wasn't the only one. A pair of teenagers later reported seeing a blue pickup truck traveling slowly behind a cyclist around the same time. They described it as an older model Chevy with visible rust. One said, "It creeped us out." The truck kept rolling at her pace, then pulled over for a second before turning. Other motorists gave conflicting accounts. Some remembered no cyclist at all. Others recalled a car pulling into a side street but couldn't be sure of the time. Crucially, no one wrote down a license plate number. Detectives pursued the truck lead aggressively. Officers knocked on doors of known owners of blue Chevy pickups registered in Sedgwick County. Each vehicle was inspected, alibis were checked, but no evidence connected any of them to Anna. The first person formally interrogated was Anna's boyfriend, Michael Reed. Detectives brought him into the station at 1:30 a.m. Michael admitted he and Anna had argued earlier that week about his late-night drinking with friends, but he insisted he hadn't seen her that night. Investigators pressed hard. Michael's hands were swabbed for traces of dirt or blood. His car was photographed. but security footage from the auto parts store where he worked showed him clocked in until 10:15 p.m., far across town. Several co-workers confirmed his presence. Detective Jensen said, "He wasn't happy about the questions, but his alibi was solid. If he was lying, too many people would have had to lie with him." Anna's parents and close friends were also interviewed. By the morning of September 13th, the case was front-page news. The Wichita Eagle ran the headline, "Young Nurse Missing, Community Joins Search." Local television stations showed aerial shots of volunteers combing fields. At noon, Anna's parents held a press conference. Standing before reporters, her father's voice broke. "She rode this road every night. Somebody out there knows where she is. Please help us bring her home." The story struck a nerve. Wichita, in the late 1990s, was considered relatively safe. Violent crimes were rare, especially in residential neighborhoods. The idea that a young nurse could vanish on her way to work terrified the community. Candlelight vigils were organized within days. Churches held prayer meetings. Volunteers kept flyers in car windows and shop doors. But behind the public unity was private frustration. Some residents criticized the police for failing to secure road cameras earlier. Others believed officers were focusing too much on Michael despite his alibi. Rumors spread quickly, some about a stalker at the hospital, others about strangers seen loitering near bike routes. Theories piled up. Evidence did not. By the end of the first week, the Wichita police had nothing solid. Detective Jensen admitted years later, "We had a blue truck and 100 guesses. That was it." The absence of evidence left only speculation. As the weeks turned into months, Anna's case began to slide toward what investigators dread most: a cold case. When the first week passed with no bicycle, no bag, and no sign of Anna Miller, investigators had no choice but to pivot. The search teams had combed 4 miles of roadway, swept the riverbank with helicopters, and put hundreds of volunteers into the fields. Nothing turned up. So the Wichita Police Department began to do what every agency must do when the physical trail runs cold: turn to theories. If Anna had simply vanished into thin air, then the only path forward was to ask, who might have taken her, and how? The press joined in quickly. Local headlines read, "Nurse Missing, No Clues Found." Reporters asked police the blunt question: if she didn't run away, who did this? The first and most obvious possibility was stranger abduction. Several residents along Main Street told police they remembered seeing a blue pickup truck driving unusually slowly between 9:30 and 9:40 p.m., the exact window when Anna would have been cycling to work. One man, James Parker, a retired mechanic, said, "She went by me quick. Head down, pedaling steady. That truck was a few car lengths behind, just crawling. I thought it looked odd at the time." The truck was described as old, rusted, possibly a Chevy, but no one caught a license plate. For detectives, it was a promising lead. A lone woman on a bicycle, late at night, and a vehicle creeping nearby. That fit the profile of an opportunistic abduction. But the problems became obvious. In Kansas during the late 1990s, that kind of blue pickup was everywhere. Farmers, mechanics, contractors, half the county drove one. Without a plate, without a witness seeing Anna and the truck in the same frame, it was circumstantial at best. As one investigator told reporters at the time, "We can't build a suspect list off a rusted Chevy pickup." That describes half the county. The theory remained, but the evidence did not advance it. The second line of thought was darker. Maybe Anna hadn't been taken by a stranger. Maybe it was someone who knew her habits. Someone who knew she always rode at the same time, down the same road. Detectives began with the inner circle. Michael, the boyfriend. He was questioned the same night Anna went missing. He admitted the two had argued the week before about her long hours at the hospital. But he had a solid alibi. Surveillance footage from a convenience store showed him working behind the counter from 9:40 to 10:05 p.m., the exact time Anna disappeared. Hospital colleagues. One co-worker had argued with Anna about scheduling. Some told
The third theory emerged from silence. Maybe this wasn't a planned abduction at all. Maybe it was an accident. Anna's route was poorly lit in places. Cars often sped on the straight sections. If a driver struck her, panic could have set in. Instead of calling for help, maybe that driver chose to hide the body and the bicycle. On paper, it made sense. A bike crash, a hidden ditch, a panicked cover-up. But again, there were problems. There were no skid marks on the road, no traces of blood, no damaged vehicle parts at the scene. And police, combing the area with dogs and spotlights, found nothing in the ditches. One resident told the Wichita Eagle, "That road isn't empty." People pass by. If she'd been hit, somebody would have noticed something. The accident and cover-up theory became a fallback explanation, but without evidence it couldn't hold weight. As these theories unfolded, police pulled in anyone who matched even part of the puzzle. The local driver, a man in his 30s, previously accused of harassing women, owned an old blue pickup. On the surface, he fit the description perfectly, but the night Anna disappeared, bar receipts and multiple witnesses placed him drinking across town. His alibi held. The co-worker, the hospital colleague who argued with Anna, was grilled, but time-stamped footage of him assisting patients throughout the evening gave him an airtight defense. The drifter, a homeless man who camped near Main Street, was also questioned. He denied seeing Anna, and no physical evidence connected him to the case. After several interviews, police had no reason to hold him. Each suspect looked good on paper, but collapsed under scrutiny. By late fall of 1998, investigators faced the hardest truth. There was no evidence. No bicycle, no purse, no flashlight, no blood. No crime scene. The case lacked what detectives call anchors. Without a body or a confirmed vehicle, everything rested on memory, rumor, and speculation. And memories, as every investigator knows, fade quickly and change under pressure. Forensics offered nothing. Wichita in 1998 had limited DNA resources, no CCTV on the streets, and no digital breadcrumbs like cell phone pings. Anna's disappearance happened in a time before technology could fill the gaps. By December, frustration boiled over. The Miller family held vigils, begging for answers. Neighbors showed up with candles. News cameras rolled, but the police had nothing new to offer. One article summarized the town's mood with a simple line: "If they can't solve this, what can they solve?" Faith in the investigation waned. By the spring of 2000, investigators admitted privately what many already feared. They had no new evidence. The case file, once thick with activity, slowed to a trickle. Phone logs, interviews, and photos were boxed up. What had been an active case became quietly labeled as unsolved. For the Miller family, those words felt like abandonment.
For the police department, it was routine. While the investigation faded, the Miller family refused to let Anna's memory disappear. Her parents kept her bedroom intact. The bed was still made with her favorite quilt. On the nightstand sat her books, a wristwatch, and a photo of her graduating nursing school. Every September, on the anniversary of her disappearance, they organized a vigil. Friends, neighbors, and co-workers joined, holding candles and reading Anna's name aloud. For the family, the case was never cold. It was a wound that stayed open. But in the eyes of investigators, the trail was frozen. In the early weeks of 1998, Anna's case was on every front page in Wichita. Headlines read, "Nurse missing on night ride." TV stations ran live updates from search sites. Flyers with Anna's face were stapled to every light pole. But the media has its own timeline. When there were no arrests, no new clues, the coverage slowed. By 2001, the case appeared only occasionally, usually in year-end reviews or features about unsolved mysteries. A local reporter later explained, "Each time we aired a piece, the phones lit up with people asking what happened. But the truth was, we didn't have anything new to tell." For Wichita residents, the first year after Anna's disappearance was marked by fear. Parents warned their daughters not to walk alone. Workers drove instead of biking. Rumors spread about stalkers and strange vehicles. But over time, fear gave way to resignation. People went back to routines. The case of Anna Miller became a story retold at coffee shops or family gatherings. More myth than investigation. By the mid-2000s, Wichita police faced practical limits. New crimes demanded resources. Homicides, assaults, and drug cases took priority. Detectives retired or were reassigned. Anna's file became just another box in the evidence room. From time to time, when new forensic technology emerged, the case was briefly reopened. Detectives checked for biological evidence that might be retested. They re-interviewed people who had made statements years earlier. But each attempt ended the same way, without progress. The lack of physical evidence was crushing. No bike, no bag, no blood, no confirmed crime scene. It was as if Anna had dissolved into the night air. For law enforcement, that absence meant limits. For the Miller family, it meant torture. Every year added weight. The family wrote letters to police chiefs, state investigators, and even national TV shows. They begged for renewed attention. But the answers rarely changed. We need new evidence. Without that, we can't move forward. While other families celebrated graduations and weddings, the Millers held annual vigils. While other parents watched their children grow older, they stared at Anna's frozen image on missing person posters. By 2005, just 7 years after that September night, Anna Miller's case was officially categorized as a cold case. The community, once electrified by fear, now saw the disappearance as part of Wichita's unresolved past. The police, stretched thin, placed the file in long-term storage. And the family, still grieving, realized they were on their own in keeping Anna's memory alive. What had once been a breaking news headline was now a box gathering dust. But for those who loved Anna, the story was not over. Because while the world moved on, Anna's fate remained unsolved. And then, 25 years later, the crime scene team moved in quickly. The ravine was sealed off. Photographs were taken from every angle. Every rock, every branch, every scrap of soil was bagged and tagged. The bicycle was lifted carefully and taken to the lab. Though corroded, the frame was intact. The number etched into the metal left no doubt. It was Anna's. Near the frame, investigators found a fragment of fabric, darkened and worn by years underground. They also collected something more striking, a broken fingernail lodged in the dirt beside the bike. Under a microscope, it still carried biological material, a sample that could be tested against DNA databases that hadn't even existed back in 1998. For the first time in decades, the forensic team had something new, something that might give Anna Miller her voice again. The DNA from the fingernail was uploaded to CADIS, the national database. Weeks passed while the lab double-checked the degraded sample. When the results came in, the name shocked even seasoned detectives. The DNA matched a man who had been arrested in 2005 for assaulting a woman. He had served time, then lived quietly, never charged again. At the time of Anna's disappearance, no one had tied him to her route, her schedule, or her bike. Back in 1998, DNA technology was in its infancy. There had been nothing to compare. But in 2023, science caught up. Now investigators had a direct link. For detectives who had worked the case in the late 90s, it was a mix of relief and regret. Relief that the case finally had traction. Regret that the connection had taken 25 years to make. The evidence was no longer speculation. It was not rumor or theory or a missing piece that could be debated. It was biological proof. The announcement hit Wichita like a thunderclap. Local stations broke into programming with the headline, "Bike of Missing Nurse Found at..." The Wichita Police Department reopened the case with full force. Detectives re-examined witness statements from 1998. Every tip, every phone call, every interview was pulled from storage and entered into digital systems. The timeline of the night was reconstructed with fresh eyes. They mapped out where Anna had last been seen and compared that with the new location of the bike. The ravine was miles from her direct route. Someone had moved her bicycle there intentionally. With the DNA result in hand, prosecutors were finally confident. The district attorney announced that charges of first-degree murder were being prepared. The suspect, long overlooked, would face trial. The evidence would not only include the bike and DNA, but also testimony from past victims of the man linked to the case. The prosecutors made it clear they believed Anna Miller's disappearance was no accident. For Anna's family, the words were a turning point. After years of silence, the justice system was finally moving. For the Miller family, the discovery was overwhelming. They had waited for answers for most of their lives. They had endured birthdays, holidays, anniversaries, all with an empty chair. When the news came, they spoke through tears. "We waited 25 years. Now at last, we know the truth." The community gathered in the center of Wichita. This time the candles lit at vigils were not only for hope. They were for gratitude that the truth had finally emerged, and for strength as the trial ahead approached. The DNA result was decisive. It tied the evidence found near the bicycle to a man with a prior history of violence. He had once been arrested in 2005 for assaulting a woman in Kansas. At the time, no one thought to connect him to the disappearance of Anna Miller. There had been no physical evidence to justify that link. Now, with DNA in hand, the Wichita Police Department, the Miller family had endured years of silence, of anniversaries marked not by celebration but by absence. They had written letters, pleaded for renewed investigations, and kept Anna's memory alive in their own quiet ways. When the news of the arrest came, they were overcome. Relief and grief collided. Relief that the truth had finally been uncovered. Grief that it confirmed what they had always feared. Anna had not survived that night. Their home, unchanged since 1998, became a memorial. Anna's room, preserved for decades, was no longer a reminder of waiting. It became a space of remembrance. Every object, every piece of clothing, every book on the shelf now carried the final weight of loss. The arrest did not heal their pain, but it gave them clarity. The people of Wichita had not forgotten Anna Miller. They had marched in vigils. They had joined the searches. They had lived with the unease of knowing someone from their own streets had vanished without explanation. When the arrest was announced, the city responded in a way that showed how deeply the case had touched them. A candlelight vigil was held downtown. Hundreds of residents attended. For years, vigils had symbolized hope, the hope of finding Anna alive. This time, the vigil carried a different weight. It was a recognition of truth. The discovery closed a chapter that had stretched across generations. Children who once saw the flyers of Anna Miller's face had grown into adults. Some had children of their own. The case had been a part of their lives for so long that the resolution felt like a moment of collective history. The community did not celebrate. They reflected. They acknowledged the endurance of a family and the persistence of investigators who never fully gave up. News spread quickly beyond Kansas. National outlets ran headlines describing the case as one of the most haunting cold cases ever solved in the state. True crime programs requested interviews. Podcasts dissected every stage of the investigation, from the initial disappearance to the breakthrough 25 years later. Documentaries highlighted how advances in forensic science, combined with persistence, had changed the outcome. The town of Wichita, long known as an unremarkable city in the Midwest, suddenly became the center of national discussion. It was not the kind of attention anyone wanted, but it carried a larger purpose. The case was no longer just about Anna Miller. It became an example of how cold cases could still be solved with time, technology, and determination. The relief of resolution was followed by harder questions. Many began to look back at 1998 and ask whether the case could have been solved sooner. The initial investigation had focused heavily on local suspects. Anna's boyfriend was interrogated for hours. Co-workers were questioned. Even neighbors faced suspicion. But the man eventually charged had slipped through unnoticed, despite a violent record. The absence of surveillance cameras in Wichita in the late 1990s, the lack of advanced forensic databases, and the limited manpower of the local police were all real barriers. But there was also criticism. Some argued that investigators had failed to connect obvious patterns. Others said the case had been abandoned too quickly when leads dried up. The debate reached the public stage. Analysts pointed out how different the outcome might have been if the same case had occurred today. Technology in DNA testing, data sharing, and surveillance was now advanced enough to make such disappearances much harder to conceal. The case of Anna Miller raised a single, painful question. Had her family endured 2.5 decades of silence because of gaps in the system? The trial was still ahead, but the discovery itself already had impact. The Kansas legislature announced additional funding for cold case units. Other states observed the response and began discussing similar reforms. Forensic labs were promised more resources to process backlog samples, ensuring that DNA evidence would not sit idle for years. Community organizations began campaigns encouraging families of the missing to submit new DNA samples for cross-referencing. The case had proven the value of persistence. What seemed impossible in 1998 had become solvable in 2023 because someone had preserved evidence and because technology had advanced. For other families across the United States, the resolution gave hope. They saw that even after decades, closure was possible. They understood. If you believe missing persons cases deserve attention, share this story, leave a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe to help keep these cases alive so that they are not lost to silence, and so that more families can find the answers they deserve.